I'm really interested in looking at new areas for exploration and expansion through the lens of eco-ability. And I'm looking today at the theory of symbolic interaction, which is pretty well established in sociology, but it goes pretty far back. I'm looking at environmental justice, as I did yesterday, and I'm also looking at aging. The treatment of people who are aging and the perception of people who are aging is almost a different species when you come to the idea of environmental justice. Eco-ability to me was a personal revolution, and in reflecting on eco-ability and coming to the conference and thinking about it, I realized it started for me in 2003 when I went to one of the formative conferences on disability studies. It was a little bigger than this conference, but just about the same stage of development of the disability studies idea. I was working on my dissertation, and I was very excited. I met a lot of authors of disability studies, and I was excited to talk to them, hear their work with them, and learn more about disability studies as a discipline. And I was, at the time, a special education teacher. When I got to the conference, one of the things that disability studies talks about a lot is the eugenics movement. And if you remember, Goddard in 1912 talked a lot about people who were feeble-minded and how they're responsible for all the sores of humanity. I got to the disability studies conference very excited and ready to take notes, and I found that they were blaming, at that time, special education teachers for all the sores of special education. I felt excluded, I felt othered, I felt labeled, I felt labeled as symbolically retarded, as if everything that was wrong with special education was created by me. So I had packed my suitcase, I was going to leave, and I went to one more presentation, which was by Dr. Robin Smith, who's now my friend, she's sitting back there. And I just overheard her talking to them, and she said, you know, teachers have to teach, they can't just sit around and think about Foucault. So I thought, okay, I can stay. And Robin, I don't remember your presentation at all, but I will never forget what you said. It just kind of cut through this symbolic labeling for me and made me feel welcome at that conference. But what I understand now is that when a group that has been oppressed for a very long time is naming and claiming their own identity, which is what disability studies was doing, you have to separate what is us from what is not us. And what happens a lot of the time is that everybody who is not us suddenly becomes oppressed by the way you separate them. So everybody gets thrown in the same evil basket when you're separating the us from the not us. Because I'm going to talk about aging in a minute, I'll tell you one of the benefits of aging is that you live through a lot of paradigm shifts, and I see one today. I see a shift from exclusive activism to inclusive activism, and I think that's very exciting. I think it's very powerful. What I saw, though, back in 2003 was that the people who were claiming their identity, and a lot of them have drifted off into disability studies and education, and I have stayed with disability studies, and they're kind of two different groups where you can identify and contribute and collaborate. So what I would like to look at this time is through the lens of eco-ability, once again, the intersectionality, dismantling the borders between groups. And that definitive study is Leslie McCall from Women's Studies, who talks about borders between groups were originally based on race, class, sexuality, and gender, and I said that yesterday as well. We know that critical animal studies, disability studies, environmental education, and environmental justice all have within them activism, calls to action. So they're not just studies, but they are part of this new inclusive activism. Critical animal studies promotes global social transformation. Disability studies uses art, teaching, and activism to advocate for social change. Environmental education wants people to take responsible action. And environmental justice, which I'm going to apply now to these different categories, talks about the inequitable distribution of toxic environmental substances and practices. They're saying that lack of knowledge and power produces environmental injustice for oppressed Symbolic interaction, I believe, has undergone a paradigm shift as well. If you look at how long it's been around, it started back with George Herbert Mead in 1934 and his student Herbert Blumer in 1969. It was then very human-centric. So if you think that these guys are working, with typewriters and carbon paper, and they also have V.F. Skinner, who's working against them and saying that the self is a product of society. People and pigeons were all the same. All we do is react to our environment. We don't think. Skinner kind of got caught up in the idea that people don't even have any souls. They just react like his pigeons that he had in his laboratory. Blumer and Mead said that humans react to things on the basis of meaning. Meanings are derived from social interaction, and they're modified through social interaction. Self is a process. That's very important because when they say meanings are modified and the self is a process, it means that the self is in constant change and constant evolution. Mead and Blumer said that symbols are created by a group as they interact and agree on the meaning of the symbol. Symbols allow us to transfer mental and temporal states from one person to another. So if you're able to look at the cave paintings that are 10,000 years old, you understand what people were thinking and doing 10,000 years ago because those are symbols and they have meaning and you're able to understand them. Mead and Blumer were very human-centric, they were linguicentric, and they said that symbols only exist in spoken and written human language, and symbolic interaction is uniquely human. However, there are many ways that you can make a career just critiquing symbolic interaction from that point of view. But Clinton Sanders, who's also a symbolic interactionist and sociologist in 2007, pointed out that this theory at the time was linguistic, it was speciesist, and that non-human animals are capable of symbolic communication and symbolic interaction, and that non-human animals have meaningful social interactions themselves. Non-human animals also have imagination. So there have been studies of the communication of animals, and we have plenty of scientific studies that show that animals do communicate in complex ways. They're still human-centric because the animals that there are enough studies on to show that they communicate symbolically are speaking human language. However, if you look at it in the spirit of eco-ability and you look at the spirit of symbolic interaction, animals do communicate symbolically. It doesn't matter if they're speaking American Sign Language or spoken English, or if they're communicating the way that animals communicate. I think it's wide open for you to look at the complex communication of animals as symbolic communication. I think that's really exciting to look at. And you know these animals. You know Mashu, who spoke American Sign Language. But as far as her speaking symbolically, there's one just very graphic, very easy to understand example. She had a human worker that worked with her and hadn't seen her for a long time, and her human worker said, I'm sorry, I haven't been here for a long time, my baby died. And Washu, who had also lost 2 babies, made the sign for cry. So she thinks of self, she thinks of other, she thinks of past, present. She identifies with what another human animal is speaking into. That's very symbolic. You probably know Al